Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this special panel discussion about using Gradescope to grade paper assignments and track student success. Gradescope is a tool designed to streamline and standardize grading paper-based digital and code assignments. It supports problem sets and projects, as well as worksheets and quizzes, exams, and papers. And with Gradescope, instructors can create more consistent grading across students and across their sections. So we're very happy today. We have some faculty champions with us who have been using Gradescope and who have offered to share how they've been using Gradescope in their classes with us. So we're very happy to welcome Jake Armour. He's from Geography and Earth Sciences, and Angela Berardinelli, who is from Computer Science. And we also have with us from Assessment and Accreditation, Mitch Cottenoir. He has been looking at Gradescope as well from an assessment standpoint, and he is here to share his subject matter expertise with us as well at the end when we have Q&A. So we're going to let our faculty experts share how they've been using Gradescope, and then at the end we're going to have time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions that come up during the presentations, please put those in the chat. And then when we get to the Q&A part of this session, I will read those questions out and let our presenters address those. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hand it over to our first faculty champion, Jake. Jake, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. And thanks, Jules, for that introduction. I'm a senior lecturer in the Geography and Earth Sciences department. My main role is I teach pretty large numbers of students in 1,000 level introductory, gen ed, and major courses. I also teach a couple upper or mid-level majors courses, and I've used Gradescope in both last semester. And I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I'll share with you how I've used it and why I use it. And then I hope to learn a lot more from the other speakers here and from the group. So that's my goal here. So I teach courses that are very visual, and I teach courses, as we all do, that strive to interact with students in some form or fashion. And pre-COVID, I would be meeting with my classes in a pretty large lecture hall, and I would be walking around and talking and handing out pieces of paper and working on things in small groups and facilitating learning that way, which works pretty well, but has its own logistical challenges of shuffling physically lots of papers and 200 student lecture halls, and then finding the time to grade those and keep track of them and then hand them back. So I was already looking for an alternative when COVID happened. And so early last semester, in one of these sessions, I learned about Gradescope. I hadn't heard of it before, and so quickly investigated and found that it might be a really good answer for the challenge that I was facing, which was to get students in these now Zoom-based large lecture classes to talk to one another in small groups and complete something tangible that then I could grade without spending hours and hours and hours doing it. So Gradescope is an interface that, at least in that semester, was supported by the university, integrated into Canvas, and produced PDF, or could use PDF documents to deliver and to receive information from students, which would allow them to provide answers in a handwritten way, and really almost any way that they're creative enough to get a PDF saved. There are other uses for Gradescope that I'm interested in exploring, and that I think Angela and Mitch might talk about today, that I won't go into here. I'm going to just provide you with what I know about how to use Gradescope in that context. I'm going to share my screen and just sort of walk you through what I do to use it in my classes. I don't do it daily, but I do it at least once a week. Bear with me for a second. Okay. Oh yes, the Mars rover is landing. I've been following that closely. So, okay. So my landing page on Canvas looks something like this. On the side, I can enact Gradescope to be a clickable link. And so if I select that, it whisks me away to a free setup of the same course with the same roster in the same section within Gradescope. And you land on a page that looks something like this. The roster can be synced pretty quickly. I won't go into all the details, I don't think, here about the setup of Gradescope logistically, but there's many of us that can help with that process. But it is nice that, after add drop, you can just sync your roster, then everybody that's in your Canvas course is in the Gradescope course. Another nice feature for my big sections that have a fair number of students registered with disability services is you can automatically include extensions and extend time for those students. And then from the dashboard, you can navigate around as you need to and create assignments. For me, I already had either PDF files saved or hard copy printouts available that I had been using in my classes. And so I wanted a method that would allow me to scan those or use those right away, especially in the context of last semester as we were scrambling to make that transition. This allowed me to do that using my phone. So with the iPhone, you can use the Notes app and just take a digital picture of as many pages as you want of an assignment, create a single PDF from that, and then you can base an assignment on that. So you could go into Gradescope and create a new assignment. And you would just come down here to the bottom, hit create, and then you have a number of options. I'm going to focus on the homework problem set option for what I do. So if I select that, I can name that assignment. I can associate it with a PDF file. I can set due dates for it, etc. And then save that. And once I've done that, and here's a pretty good example of how I start my semester off with an assignment that we do interactively in class. So usually the second day of class, well, not usually, but lately in the second day of class, we break the class into breakout rooms of about 4 to 5 students. I provided Gradescope in advance, and I provided this PDF so they can open this PDF in those breakout rooms and talk about the questions. And in this case, it was something to help them get to know each other and to get comfortable in the class. We were talking about the Sparta, North Carolina earthquake, which last semester had happened within a week of doing this activity. So it can be pretty timely. And here I created boxes on my PDF that correspond to where I am looking for their answer. And what I've got down here at the bottom, or on the right side, excuse me, are questions that I've assigned. So I had a document, it was a PDF. I created it in Word, saved it as a PDF, imported it into Gradescope, and then I just associated question 1 with question 1, question 2 with question 2, question 3 with question 3. And I drag and dropped boxes where I would encourage them to put their text, with the idea that they will print these out and either handwrite or import it into a text editor or something and overlay text on it, but basically create a place to put their answers within these spaces. That's one way to set up one of these activities. And there's a benefit to doing that we'll probably explore as a group later, and that is AI grading or artificial intelligence grading. If the Gradescope software knows where to look for an answer, it can start to look at all 200 submissions and organize them into piles or in groups of similar kinds of responses. And then you can grade the piles rather than grading every single individual student submission. So that's one huge time saver with this setup. There are some drawbacks too in getting students up to speed on how to submit or upload their PDF and associate their text with these boxes, but that's workable. And hopefully folks will share their experiences who have used Gradescope with that process. I'm going to back out of this style of setup and show you a second one that I use more frequently. Let's see. This is something I discovered last semester that helped me a lot. And I'll share it with you, and maybe you'll find it helpful, or maybe you'll have a suggestion. So in this particular assignment, which is week 2, so here's the second week, I utilized a assignment I'd used in the past. So I just took digital pictures of it and created a PDF with my phone, emailed it to myself, and then uploaded it into Gradescope. And in here, there are a number of predefined boxes and questions that made it harder, at least in my mind, to associate specific space for them to write their answer. So instead, what I wanted them to do is to freely answer. So it's a sort of open-ended assignment. They can write their answers in any way, on a sheet of paper. They can write them on the back of their notebook. They can type them in Word. However they want to do it is fine, as long as they save it as a PDF and upload it. And then they associate their upload pages with questions that I have laid out in this PDF. So here I've got page 1. And on page 1, I have questions 1 and 2, which are sort of thought-provoking kinds of questions that ask them about their opinion. And they may choose to sketch or draw or write or check or bullet point. They're free to answer these questions however they like. And rather than creating individual question 1, question 2, question 3, I simply lump them into the whole page. So page 1 contains questions 1 through 2 and is worth a total of 2 points. So now we're starting to evaluate on the faculty end the student submission by page. I've found that a huge time savings for these styles of assignments, as opposed to grading each individual question per student, which you can imagine could get time consuming if there's 200 of them times however many questions you might have. So my assignments generally are effort-based, these particular ones. So they're a participatory, interactive kind of activity. I'm not as concerned that all the questions are correct. This isn't a test, this isn't a quiz, this is exploratory. So the grading is primarily effort-based, completion, thoughtfulness, and I can provide feedback here too, which is another nice feature of Gradescope, in a pretty efficient way, and I'll show you that in a moment. So this is a 6-page assignment with variable number of questions per page. Just scroll through it to give you a sense of how it looks. And so they can choose to print this out and handwrite their answers directly on it, which is the easiest way for students to do it. But again, not all students have access to a printer or are resistant to that idea. So they can take that PDF and open it up in PowerPoint. They can open it up in Paint, and they can create a text box and write, in those same spaces, and then save that as a new PDF and upload it. So there's definitely some time well spent at the beginning of the class explaining, how basically to create a PDF and how to edit it, how to modify it creatively and upload it. But I found that I was having those same conversations with Canvas when I just used Canvas for the same kind of undertaking. So it hasn't really imparted a new layer of work for me. But it does require a little bit of setup time for the students. So let me show you how this might get graded at the other end of the process here. So as students submit, they're time stamped. There's some detailed information about who that student is and how many pages they uploaded, and that's all listed here. You can sort that alphabetically however you like. And then once your deadline is reached and students have finished their submissions, you can go to the grading component here, and you can start to evaluate those student submissions. The nice thing about this is that you can set up this particular style of question association however you want. I mentioned that I moved to this model of doing it per page because then I only had to have 6 stops per student, as opposed to, if we add up all these questions, 25 stops or however many it might be. So it is a time saver for this style of assignment, for me anyway, to grade it this way per page, or to lay it out per page. One When I grade them, you grade them by question, or by, in my case, by page. So if I click on page 1, I can start to grade student submissions. And here's an example of how one student chose to do it. So they did it in their notebook, they took a picture of it and uploaded that. It loads a number of pages. So this student, for example, just loaded 1 page. So they chose to do all their answers on 1 page. So as I toggle through and provide feedback, I can just go to next ungraded, and it'll just toggle me through each student who doesn't yet have a score. The way these are scored is up to you, but here you have a rubric that you can lay out and be as detailed or as general as you want to be. For this activity, I'm pretty general because much of the conversation happens in class interactively. Some assignments lend themselves to providing lots of detail here for what you might give points for or take points off for. Each rubric item is going to be either, this one's 100%. So this student got questions 1 through 2 correct, or at least complete and thoughtful in this particular instance. And so they got full credit, and you would move to the next one. I run into students who either forget to answer questions or forget to associate their questions with a particular page. And so those students show up in a different way and are harder to grade, might require some back and forth, and you might hit unanswered and give them a different score. And notice that now it took 2 points away from a 2-point question, so they would get 0 on that. A couple nice features I'll point out pretty quickly is if you have comments that you make in this box for student submissions, it'll remember them. And so if it's a comment you make often, you can just come down and select it from the list and add it, which is a big time saver. You can also, as you can in Canvas, annotate their submissions right on top of them. So you can add text or drop a pin and describe, question 7 is problematic for this reason, et cetera, or think about this other option. So you can give that kind of feedback if you choose to as well. Obviously, that's all time dependent and how you've laid out your assignment. One thing that I have found challenging, and maybe some folks can share some feedback about that, I've talked to Gradescope folks about this as well, is that if students don't associate their uploaded pages with the pages of the document that they're answering questions from, then it's not easy for the grader to see where their answers are. And that's probably the main challenge I've found with this open format style of assignment receiving. I'll show you what that might look like. This week 3 activity had some examples of this. So if I go to grade submissions and I hit the first page, you get this message, which Gradescope was even surprised that I was getting. The challenge is that Gradescope says assign your answers to the pages that they go with in the document, please. And the student moves on and doesn't do it. And Gradescope lets them submit it successfully anyway. And then gives you this message that the students did not select any pages for this question. So we're trying to work towards a model where it doesn't let them successfully submit until they have assigned those pages. Because on their end, they don't realize they're really doing anything wrong if they just sort of ignore that suggestion. They think maybe it's only a suggestion, not a requirement. If they don't make that association, you get this screen and then you are forced to toggle through, which you can do pretty easily, all their pages and find their answers. On these formatted style assignments, it's not too big of a deal. I can pretty quickly find their answers and give them credit, but obviously in other circumstances and other formats, that becomes problematic, especially with large numbers of students. So I'm not going to do this 600 times, but maybe I'll do it 20 times for those students who struggle and still are making meaningful effort to try to improve, but haven't yet. So that's one issue that I've seen come up, but that's one of the only issues I've had so far with it. The feedback repeatability is really nice. The format flexibility is really nice, and the integration into Canvas, which I don't want to take up too much more time than what I'm allotted, but there is the ability to deep link your Canvas assignments with the Gradescope assignments. And that's something I've started to do this semester, which was also a big improvement because it populates the calendar in Canvas with assignments that you put in Gradescope. The final step will probably be covered later, which is how you upload and sync those grades into Canvas, but that's a pretty straightforward process also on the back end.
Thank you so much, Jake. This has really been very, very enlightening and helpful, just showing how you're using Gradescope in your courses and showing some of the challenges, but also many of the benefits of using Gradescope. We're going to hand the floor over to Angela now, and she is going to share how she's using Gradescope in her course.
Yes, I am. I am going to start off with just a couple of slides to give you context, and then I will jump in and do demoing similar to what Jake did. Jake covered the first two boxes here, so that's really helpful. I won't have to spend much time on that. But I wanted to delve into, because I think some people on the call or some people who watch the video later will be like, I don't know if this will work with the types of assessments I give in my course. So I wanted to give an overview first of the types of assessments you can easily create in Gradescope. That first option, they call it exam quiz, but I think of it as the template. And so that's what Jake showed with the boxes. If you have an assignment, I think this, for me, this works best when it's in-person assignments. So I have an in-person class, they're completing it in the classroom. So I provide the printouts. And then the students fill them in, turn them in at the end of class, and then I might upload them in a batch, which is, very easy to do with Gradescope. But you could, in a remote environment, tell students you have to print this or write on it electronically and upload it. And I actually did do that, found a way to do that remotely, which was a challenge, but I got some input from some colleagues that really helped with that. The homework/problem set one, that's your free form assignments, which could be, it doesn't have to be homework or problem set. It's really just anything you want students to upload their own format for. So that works really well for things they complete out of class where you can't say this is the exact format, or things that they're submitting remotely. I actually haven't used the bubble sheet because I don't ever give bubble sheet assignments or exams or anything, but that is supported in Gradescope. So if that's something you use a lot in your teaching due to class size or the types of assessments you need to give for your material, that is supported and auto-graded because you just use their format of bubble sheet and it can automatically grade the students' submissions. Programming assignments, I won't spend much time talking about those today because those are pretty niche, but it does have auto-graded programming assignments or manually graded programming assignments in pretty much any language you want to use. So if you are teaching statistical programming with R or programming in Java or C++ or Python or literally anything you can install on a Linux box, you can have auto-graded through Gradescope. The online assignments, I've been starting to use those a lot more in class since we've been remote. And so it has the multiple choice, what they called when I was in college, the multiple choice, where you check all that apply. Any short answer, essay, and then the file upload, which essentially is like a mini version of the free form problem set, which I've really liked. And then new this semester is being able to grade essays and reports in an understandable format. So I've been excited to start trying to use that this semester. I have been using Gradescope for several years. So as a solo instructor, these are the types of courses and sizes of courses that I've used it in by myself with no co-teachers, no TAs, so just me being responsible for all of the grading. And the types of assignments that I've used it in. So your in-class paper quizzes and exams, programming assignments of various types, in-class activities where I typically, when we were in person, I would have the students turn in to me at the end of class, then I would upload it myself and then grade it. homework assignments, those online assignments. And then I did with my graduate student course, they had to do a project proposal. And then once their proposal was accepted, they had to submit their final report through Gradescope. So I've used it for those types of assignments. And then recently I have been teaching larger classes. And so in collaboration with either co-teachers or TAs, so multiple people are in charge of grading for the course. I've had online courses. These are all, well, not all of them. The online graduate course was before COVID. The undergraduate data structures course was before COVID and in person. And then the logic courses and data science courses have been post-COVID, so remote. And I've used similar types of assignments in Gradescope with those courses, although the addition of the shorter writing assignments and then project reports with rubric-based grading. My team taught data science studio courses have had a lot of that going on, and I can show examples. So I want to go through an example of how to design these types, although I don't need to spend so much time on the ones that Jake already talked about. So when I started using Gradescope, I changed the format of how I created my assessments because I gave them a space they were supposed to answer problem 1. And I tell Gradescope, this is where the problem 1 answer is. So I really need the students to kind of stick to where the problem goes. And then say this problem, they're supposed to put the output for each of these. And so I highlight literally this little box and I'm like, this is where the answer is for this part of this problem. And so I got better at it. This is one of my earlier ones, but I got better at designing where exactly the students needed to place their answer to make grading easiest for me, kind of optimizing there. So that's one example of the templated assignment. Here's a quiz, which is basically the same thing, so I won't spend any time on that. A lot of my assignments are these free form assignments where students can turn it in however they like. So I just give them the list of problems and then they write down their answers. Some of them will, use this PDF and write it in on the PDF using their own tablets or something. This is a problem where they had to draw Venn diagrams. And so it's not just text-based assignments that you can support with this. Here is the electronic template assignment that I was really excited to come up with. So I actually created this document in Google Slides, but I made it as a PDF for presentation purposes here. But the students would receive edit access to Google Slides, and this tells them what the activity is about. And then this is a group activity, so they fill in the names of the students who will be in their group here and who's doing what. And then they type their answers, and that's how I use the template in Gradescope to say, I have the students export this as a PDF when they're done, and I know question 1's answer will go here, question 2's answer will go here, 3, 4, and so on. And so that's a way that I've been able to facilitate these remote but templated assignments without making assumptions about access to printers or things like that. And I give them pretty detailed instructions of how do you download a PDF in Google Slides, where do you upload it in Gradescope. After your submission uploads, you will see it in view-only mode and add your group members. Since this was a group assignment, it does support adding additional people to the submission. So that's about how I've designed the assessments for Gradescope. And now I want to show a little bit of the grading workflow because that's my absolute favorite thing about Gradescope. Let me remember my keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so the homework sets. Jake showed this view in terms of grading. It's helpful when you are working with TAs because it shows you who graded each problem. You probably didn't notice because you are new to Gradescope, but Jake had, a bunch of people listed for each problem that had graded it. So I assume that's him and his co-teachers or TAs. My TA team prefers that, TA1 will grade problem 1, TA2 will grade problem 2. That's how they choose to split theirs up. And we as the instructional team see this. Students never know who graded what parts of their submission, who left what comments. So as the instructor, you get access to that information. But if I go into, say, this problem, which one of my TAs graded, and a student has a question about it, if there is a note added, it will tell you who wrote it in the teacher view, but it wouldn't tell you who wrote it as a student, which I think is nice for some grading anonymity and some protection of TAs in terms of being able to manage your course that way. And then let me see if I can find a couple different. So here's a student who didn't select anything, which I didn't know that wasn't an intended feature. So I'm glad Jake's working with them to fix that because it really bugs me. I actually take off points if they don't do it on exams because I get really frustrated. My TAs are more understanding. So here's a student who kind of wrote it electronically and uploaded that and used lots of pretty colors. Most students do opt for just taking a picture of something they hand wrote. The rubrics are really nice, way more functional to me than Canvas rubrics because I can always add or remove rubric items. I can change the point values. So I get to number 60 of 70 and I realize, oh, everyone made this mistake. Maybe I messed up teaching it, not they messed up understanding it. And so instead of taking off 50% of the points, I might say, oops, I should make this only worth half a point, or I might make it -0 to give them the feedback that they're missing something, but not take off any points. And I can just do that and it applies it to every student submission. So anyone who has that rubric item applied, it dynamically, would alter their score. If this -3 got changed to a -1, then it would update this student's score and every student who had that rubric item applied. There's also tons of keyboard shortcuts, which when I'm actually grading, I use that. So you see these numbers, you can just hit the 1 or 2 or 3 to apply however many rubric items you want. I can add 1, 2, 3, 4 to this student, or maybe take them away because that's not accurate. And then I can move to the next student and apply 4 and 6 and move to the next student with the arrow keys, or when they're ungraded, you can use the Z key. You can go through the pages with J and K. So it just is faster for me than having to move my mouse around on the screen. So that's a homework type assignment. I've been doing practice problems in class with my students. And so after they've done their reading before class, we've done a reading review at the beginning of class, which is just kind of like in a Zoom poll. And then they ask questions and we have some engaged discussion. Then I send them to small teams to work on some extra practice problems. And so this problem, I gave them the option to either type in their answer or they could, write it on paper and upload a file where they wrote it out. Because you saw a lot of my students prefer to handwrite their answers to these types of problems. So I always give them that option. To create this online assessment, I put the correct answers in. But what I have here, this is a blank for them to type in or a file upload. I don't think this one has any multiple choice, but your options are, short answer, free response, multiple choice, select, and file upload. So this is like Canvas quizzes, but then you can use the Gradescope grading mechanism. I found that partial credit was not consistent in Canvas. It was really confusing to me. And that might be on me and not understanding how to use Canvas, but I did have a lot of trouble with it. In terms of the students' projects, like written projects, this is a team taught course where students had final group projects. And so these are my fake boxes. They don't really mean anything. These were our rubric items, and each instructor had specific sets of rubric items they had to go in and apply and grade separately. So if you look at our grading, you would see my code teacher with the initials AP graded items 1 through 3. SM was 4, 5, and 6. I did the programming stuff and so on. And so for like a specific example, their entire written report is here. I can page through it. I could add comments or highlight things. And then our rubrics were every item was 3 levels, either insufficient, good, or exceptional. And so I uploaded these, so I'm the bad person who didn't tag the questions to the pages on this one. This isn't the student's fault. But yeah, so you can use written reports and apply rubric items with adding these things. So this is something new to me because I am more of a math CS background, but I've started assigning more written reports in the types of courses that I've been teaching lately. And so it does support this. It worked really well, even for a team taught course, to know how much was left to grade, who was accountable for what. It was really easy to keep track of that kind of stuff. I think that was all of the different things from what Jake showed that I wanted to get into.
Okay, thank you, Angela, very much. We are going to hand it over to Mitch now from Assessment and Accreditation.
All right, so I'll talk about this from the assessment side here. So I'm the Director of Assessment in the Office of Assessment and Accreditation. I have multiple, my background is varied. So I taught high school for a few years, and then I went back and got a master's in chemistry. And so I taught chemistry for probably more than 10 years. So I have a lot of in classroom experience, and this is a software that I wish I had the opportunity to use when I was teaching, because it really has some good aspects to it. So I thought I'd kind of start off by looking at how does feedback, because this, to me, when I look at this software, there's 2 pieces to it. There's the piece that helps faculty do their work quicker and be more efficient and get feedback back to students. But there's also the student side of this, where how do they use that feedback that you're providing to help them improve on their learning? So, when you go and look at some of the literature that's on feedback, we see that it's one of the most powerful influences on student processes, and it helps them to develop an effective learning. When you look at this, you want students to be able to self-regulate their learning. They need to know when they understand something and when they don't. And without any feedback, they're able to do this, but not very well, right? The feedback that comes from the faculty on how students are progressing in their learning helps them develop the ability to sort of self-diagnose whether they're learning effectively or not. And this is a skill that we want them to develop for lifelong learning. If you look at sort of the way feedback used to be, sort of in the old days, it was mainly just instructor back to student, but we found that it's more effective if that feedback is more like a dialogue between the faculty member and the student. And I think there's some characteristics of Gradescope that are kind of help this take place. You can provide feedback to them. You can tell them, maybe you need to come in after class or think about maybe doing something a little bit differently. So you can get things to go more into a dialogue, I think, with some of that's here. And in the current environment, I think that's really important because students are craving that feedback from faculty because they're not getting that interaction that they're used to getting in the classroom, right? We want to use both formative and summative assessments. So I think both faculty members here, both Jake and Angela, have shown that they use this formative and also summative. We lost a lot of our formative feedback that we get as faculty members in a classroom. You don't get to see that student third row back that has this puzzled look on their face of what is they talking about. We have to try and find ways to get that feedback in a different way. And by also providing them multiple opportunities to practice those knowledge skills, behaviors, attitudes, however you want to think of it, in those formative assessments before they get to those summative assessments that usually have a bigger impact on what their final grades are going to be. Right. So if you think about the challenges that are associated with providing feedback to students, time is probably one of the biggest issues. Not only, you have to develop assignments. All of us are probably developing assignments constantly. We don't always rely on or use the same assignments year after year. Depending on what the faculty-student ratio is in a class. You've seen Angela, she teaches some small classes, some big classes. Jake's classes are 200 or more. So those larger courses, time really becomes an issue. That feedback is better if it's a quick turnaround, which if you're hand grading things with large number of students, that doesn't happen. And then having to go back and regrade something. Right. So as Angela said, if you hit question in student number 60 and you're like, oh crap, I need to go back and fix this. If you have to go back and do that hand grading, your time is pretty much shot. Right. Consistency is an issue that we sometimes have. That's something that I tried to figure out, what's the best way to be most consistent in grading chemistry tests or questions. Do you grade the whole assignment? Do you grade one page at a time? Do you grade one question at a time? So you kind of have to look at how you want to do that. If you have multiple graders, everybody seems to have a little bit different level of expectation. And so, that can cause issues. And I can remember as a grad student grading chemistry exams, we walk into a room and each of us would be given a section and you go off and grade. So that can cause some problems with consistency. If you're not in the same room, which likely that's not happening nowadays. And students, the literature shows that students prefer the individualized feedback, right? So that's kind of hard to give in a large class. This goes back to that time issue. But how do you give that individualized feedback? And I think that they've shown that Gradescope can give you the opportunity to give some of that more individualized feedback. And then I think even more important nowadays is the usability of the assignments across different delivery modes, right? You want something that no matter what happens, it's going to be usable either in a face-to-face or an online mode because we don't know where we're going to be at. We don't know, more courses are starting to be turned into online courses. We want to be able to use those assignments and grade and do those things the same way across different delivery modes. And so Gradescope helps with those types of things, right? So from an assessment standpoint, the ability to accommodate the variety of different types of assignments is really key because you want to give students different opportunities to show how they've mastered the material, right? So in Gradescope, you have this opportunity to allow students to do different things. They can submit in different ways. They have some choice in how this information comes in, which sort of alleviates some of the stress that they're dealing with. And hopefully we're going to get better results out of it. We've seen how, one of the best things about this is the rapid grading that you can do, which helps with that turnaround and getting that information back to the students. So with the rubrics, you can establish that criteria for awarding points or credit. If you want to do partial grading, which it looks like a lot of these assignments have that partial grading, so students can, they get credit for maybe getting half the problem right, and that at least allows them to see where they're, where they're doing well, and then that next step where they need to go, trying to figure out, how much of this can I actually do. And with the partial credit, there's no need to, you don't have to do the regrade, right? You can, those rubrics are built to speed that piece up for you. And then you can also decrease your turnaround time, right? So the speed at which this allows faculty to get information back to students is really important. It allows those students to be able to interact and see where they are more rapidly, right? And then with the consistency, I had on here grading one question at a time. Jake has found that it's better to do for some of the assignments a page at a time. So it allows you to achieve that consistency how you want to, and grade how you think is best for your students. And then the ability to use the rubric for multiple graders, right? So if you have graduate students grading and you want to go back and look at how they're grading and see what's going on, you have that ability to go in there and kind of supervise and make sure that somebody's not necessarily being too rough or too soft on the students in how they're grading. And then we can also get back sometimes from the graduate students, their perspective sometimes is good for us to hear as well. Because as experts, sometimes we don't always have the same, remember what it's like to struggle with some things, right? And those graduate students are maybe a little bit closer to that point, and they can help out with that. You can add the instructor comments directly. They both showed how you could do that. And this is independent. Angela talked about using it in class, face-to-face, or in this different delivery modes. So 2 more slides I just wanted to show. In the fall with the pilot project, we did try and send out surveys to faculty and students just to kind of get some feedback about what they thought about Gradescope. So student feedback, we didn't have a lot of participation. And so this is just based off of a small number of students. What was the most beneficial and what was least beneficial to them. The feedback was what they thought was the most beneficial. If you looked at most of these 11 answers that came in, it was about how beneficial the feedback was. Probably the most common negative feedback on there was that sometimes it was long upload speeds. And that may be more relevant to their internet connection. It's not something that we can necessarily handle. But with most technology, there's going to be these positive and negative things that go along with it. The thing that faculty noted was the workflow and the ability to grade, and just the use of the rubrics, how beneficial that was. And then the one comment was making, you want to make sure. I think a lot of people had to jump into this not really knowing all the aspects of Gradescope to begin with, but figuring out what you can and can't do with each of the individual assignments, how you can put the feedback in, that would be something that people would want to look at. So from an assessment side, the only other thing I can think of is in collecting this data, then if you're doing like gen ed assessment or something like that, and you need to provide evidence in a program report, you've got your data collected very easily, and it's easy to pull that data. So that helps in those respects. So there are a lot of other aspects on assessment we could go into, but I don't want to spend too much of our time on those types of things.
Thank you very much, Mitch. And we may have time for you and Jake and Angela to continue sharing some more. I want to see what questions we have. We don't have any questions in the chat. If you have a question you want to put in the chat, you can put it in the chat. But we're such a small, intimate group here that I would welcome you to just unmute and ask a question if you feel comfortable doing so.
One thing I remembered that I didn't go over was I didn't show the assignment statistics and the analytics that Gradescope supports. So if anyone's interested in seeing that, that could be one of your questions. I won't force it on you, but it is pretty cool.
Yeah, let's see if we have, do we have anyone who has a question? And I know that whenever I ask that, I usually try to wait 10 seconds to let people think.
I will add that, yeah, Angela's mentioning about the statistics was very valuable. I do have to deliver gen ed statistics to my chair frequently, and it made it much easier to be able to do that. So that was nice.
Since we don't have a question yet from the audience, Angela or Jake, would one of you be willing to share your screen and talk about the statistics and the benefits?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think you saw this screen in Jake's presentation, which is like the really nice bar graph. This is an exam from a previous semester. So the really nice bar graph of like where your students are at the end with the really simple summary statistics, but there's also a statistics button on the side. And I have used that when I go over exams because it shows me for each problem, like what, okay, clearly that was not a great problem for my students. But there are a few of these that are almost touching the 100%, which means like every student got the whole thing right. And so that's really helpful for me. And I tag my problems just with like the topic, but I could also tag them if I was more diligent with the topic or the content that's covered. And then you could generate reports on your tags. So like what topic are students doing best on across all the assignments? I haven't gotten that crazy with it yet. But like the average on this problem was 95% compared to 11%. And that makes sense. This, I think, was a counting problem, and this was a proofs problem, which students typically struggle with more. And so this tells me which topics they really understood and which topics they still struggled with when they got to this summative assessment towards the end. And question by question.
This is really useful because this is a snapshot that helps you adapt your lesson. When you see that students, for instance, did not really do well on the proofs question, then you know that you're going to review that in your next class and that you're going to help them try to understand that better. So this is a really powerful tool that Gradescope has.
Yeah, and drilling down, I can also see what percentage of students had each rubric item applied. So my rubric items, I think this is a 5-point problem, and I did positive grading. So they had 5 things they had to do to get 1 point each. And you see that only 2% made this part of the assumption. That's not great. And so that's something I know where, I mean, these are the 5 things they had to do, and very few of them did all of them. But if I look at, say, the easier one, this is 18 factorial, I'm really excited about 18. So most students just got a complete correct, or they expressed it kind of weirdly, but it was correct. So I kept those separate rubric items, even though they were worth the same number of points, because I wanted to know how many of them, it tells me the students too, but it helps me know how many of them knew the notation versus how many of them got the idea right but didn't understand the notation. So that's more information for me as an instructor in how I design my rubrics. But you wouldn't have to go that crazy with it, obviously. Yeah.
Jake, anything that you want to add about using analytics?
No, I haven't used them all that much yet. I had a question for Angela. One of the challenges that we all have when we're thinking of using a new software is the time it takes to transition, and then the transparency to the students. And last semester, I wasn't aware of, or maybe it wasn't an option to deep link my assignments in Canvas. So I had to kind of do a lot of double dipping where I would set the assignment up in Canvas as like a dummy assignment with the words Gradescope next to it. So it would go in the calendar so that they would know to find it. and so on, it was a little frustrating and clumsy. But this semester I've moved to when I create the assignment in Canvas, I just deep link it directly to Gradescope. And I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of exploring that connectivity. I didn't know if you've had any wisdom to share, Angela, about your experience with or without doing that, and your students knowing when to do assignments and not missing things and providing some clarity.
Yeah, so it's way easier with the Canvas integration, which I believe, and maybe Jules or Mitch knows more about this than I do. I believe our pilot has been extended through calendar year 2021. So through this semester, summer semester, and next fall. So anyone who's thinking about it but knows they don't have time to do it this semester, there's still time to get in on the pilot and give some feedback before a final decision is made. But yes, the Canvas integration, I used it for several semesters at another institution that didn't have a license. And I used it here before we had the pilot going. And so it is clumsier when you don't link it to Canvas. And but it is like you said, the Canvas integration is nice. I can show that a little bit. So this is for my current semester. And so my students have a homework due on Monday. And if I go to the module where that is, this is probably not the most effective way, but I post the problems separate from the link. I guess I could probably put the link to the problems inside here too, which is probably better. So for me, it loads the instructor view, which is the grading view. But for the students, it just puts in line, like click here to upload or whatever the student picture looks like. And it's for this specific assignment. This is the homework set to like grading. If I went natively here in Gradescope, oops, this is not the right semester. Here we go. So here's the homework set to, and this is the same page you saw that pulled into Canvas. So the students can submit from right inside Canvas. They like that. Like Jake said, for the course overall, it's just a matter of syncing the Canvas roster. It's literally a single click. So we'll see if any of my students dropped. I start with 75. We'll see. I still have 75. I haven't failed any of my students yet. Okay, so yeah, you sync the roster, super easy. Whereas I would have to send out individual emails for them if I wasn't using the single sign-on. The students would have to create a separate account and sign up for it, and that was confusing to students. For sure. It's better that it's single sign-on right now. And then the sending grades back. So I think I actually have a few that I haven't sent back to Canvas yet. So here is the practice problems from a while ago. They have it in here. And then it's just a single button to send it back to Canvas. I linked it to the Canvas assignment already. And as soon as this finishes posting, I'll show you that page too.
And Angela, about linking an assignment in Canvas, you can't do it from the Canvas end, can you? You can only do it from the Gradescope end.
As far as I know, it's only from the Gradescope end. Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right, I'm getting bored of waiting, so I'm just going to reopen Gradescope again. So here, their first lab assignment, I would, in the settings, when there's nothing linked, there's a link button here, and then you can just select from your Canvas assignment list what assignment this corresponds to, and that's what creates the deep link in the LMS.
And I've noticed if you name them the same, it's smart enough to pick it.
Yeah, if they're exactly the same name, it'll find it. If you get a little too creative, that one confuses students, so I stopped doing that, and two, then you have to kind of manually find it in the list.
Okay, well, we are at time. This is such a wonderful tool that the university has purchased. Mitch, do you have the confirmation on how long that we've got it for? I believe that what Angela stated was accurate.
Yeah, we have the contract through December of 2021.
Yeah.
So we're going to be, my office is going to be running a pilot group. So there will be we'll be looking for people to work with on implementing this in their courses.
Absolutely. So we will close with that. We will close with saying a few things. We'll say thank you so much to Jake and Angela and Mitch for presenting today. And because we're also going to have this up on the internet, we'll also close by saying if you are interested in piloting Gradescope, obviously maybe not this semester, but maybe next semester, I think that contacting Mitch, sending him an email would be the thing to do. And we can see about getting you in as part of the pilot. Does that sound good?
Perfect.